Every so often, a single act of cruelty ignites a reckoning that reverberates through an entire community. This is one of those stories, a raw account of bravery met with senseless hate and justice served in the most unexpected way. When United States Marine Sergeant Jonathan King, a devoted husband and proud black serviceman, becomes the target of a racist couple's vicious rampage, few could predict how swiftly their petty malice would backfire. Their hatred sets off a chain of events that tests the limits of loyalty and compassion, culminating in a spectacular moment of payback. Stay tuned, because you won't believe what happens next. Sergeant Jonathan King wasn't new to upheaval and change. A proud Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton in Southern California, he had grown accustomed to answering his country's call, moving from place to place without complaint. Despite the restless demands of military life, this recent transfer was supposed to be different. It was intended to be a fresh start for him and his wife, Alyssa. They had found a modest two-story house tucked into a quiet neighborhood just a short drive from the base. The neighborhood was dotted with palm trees, well-tended lawns, and a sense of serenity that was exactly what Jonathan needed after multiple deployments overseas. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. The house had a small patch of lawn, a front porch with enough room for a couple of rocking chairs, and a spacious garage that Jonathan intended to turn into a workout space. He and Alyssa spent their first week settling in, painting the walls a soothing shade of pale blue, hanging up family photos, and letting the sweet smell of new beginnings fill the air. Even as a child in Georgia, Jonathan had faced prejudice because of the color of his skin. He never let it stop him from pursuing his dreams, and the Marines had become both a calling and a refuge. The discipline, the camaraderie, and the focus on service above self resonated with him in a way that overcame the ugliness he had encountered at times. Despite the adversity, he rose through the ranks, known for his calm leadership and unwavering sense of honor. But not everyone saw Jonathan's uniform and recognized his patriotism. Some only saw his skin color. He was no stranger to microaggressions, a cold stare at the local grocery store, or the stifled laughter of a passerby who decided a black Marine was somehow a contradiction. Yet, he rarely let it disturb his equilibrium. He believed kindness and fortitude would silence any hate that might cross his path. Jonathan first noticed the older couple next door, Ned and Lisa Anders, when he and Alyssa were unloading their boxes from a moving truck. The Anders stood on their porch, arms folded, glowering. Their posture radiated disapproval. Alyssa offered a neighborly wave, but Lisa turned away. It was awkward, but Jonathan tried to brush it off. Maybe they were simply having a bad day. A few evenings later, Jonathan decided to introduce himself properly. The Marine Code of Conduct was ingrained in his every step, and courtesy was paramount. He walked over to the Anders' neatly trimmed yard, a friendly smile on his face. But as soon as he approached, Ned looked him up and down with a sneer. "You lost, boy?" Ned snapped. The venom in his voice was as clear as day. Jonathan felt his stomach tighten, a familiar ache that came from experiences he'd hoped were left behind. Still, he forced a polite greeting. "I'm your new neighbor," he said, extending a hand. "Sergeant Jonathan King. My wife Alyssa and I moved in next door last week. Just wanted to say hello." Ned stared at Jonathan's hand like it was laced with poison. After an uncomfortable silence, Lisa tugged her husband's sleeve. "Inside, Ned," she muttered. "We got nothing to talk about with him." In seconds, the door slammed, leaving Jonathan still standing with his hand extended in midair. Disappointed but not entirely surprised, he trudged back home. Inside, Alyssa watched the exchange through the window, her heart sinking. She placed a reassuring hand on Jonathan's shoulder when he returned, but neither of them knew how to solve a problem rooted in unspoken hatred. Despite the Anders' blatant disrespect, life carried on. Jonathan woke each morning at dawn for his runs, often jogging in his standard issue marine PT gear. His evenings were spent tinkering with the home, adjusting new furniture, and enjoying quiet dinners with Alyssa. Their new home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a space to heal from the stress of the world. However, the Anders made that nearly impossible. The harassment started small. Every time Jonathan's garbage cans were left on the curb, they were mysteriously knocked over. Under the cover of darkness, someone egged the freshly painted garage door, leaving sticky trails. Jonathan and Alyssa woke up one morning to find vile, racist graffiti scrawled on the sidewalk in front of their property. Though the culprit was never caught in the act, the Anders' drawn curtains and suspicious glances led Jonathan to strongly suspect their involvement. Nevertheless, he kept his composure. Part of being a Marine meant maintaining discipline in the face of provocation. Alyssa urged him to confront the couple, but Jonathan didn't see the point in escalating tension. There was no solid evidence pointing to the Anders, and he knew that any confrontation might play directly into their hands. Still, the emotional toll weighed heavily. He could sense Alyssa's worry every time he left for base. There was a lingering doubt. Would her safety be threatened while he was away? Alyssa, although strong, wasn't a trained Marine. Jonathan made a point to check the home's security cameras. After a few more incidents of vandalism, he hoped it might deter whoever was behind the attacks, but more than that, he wanted tangible evidence should anything worse happen. One afternoon, Jonathan was fixing the fence along the side of his yard when he heard a gentle cough behind him. Turning around, he found an elderly woman standing at the boundary of the neighboring property that belonged to someone else. She had a warm smile and an inquisitive gaze. "Sergeant King, right?" she asked. "I'm Linda Aguilar. I live 2 houses down. I've seen you around, and I just wanted to say, if you ever need help with anything, let me know." Jonathan smiled, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Aguilar. That's very kind. I'm just, well, honestly, adjusting to the neighborhood hasn't been easy." A shadow of concern crossed Linda's face. "Yes, I've heard about Ned and Lisa Anders. They've always had a problem with," she paused delicately. "They've had issues with neighbors in the past. You're not the first they've tried to intimidate." "Curious," Jonathan pressed gently. "Is there a history?" Linda sighed. "They moved here after Ned retired early. Lisa's father left her this house. Ever since then, they've run off more than a few neighbors. They're set in their ways, and from what I've seen, they've made it clear they prefer neighbors who look just like them." Though it stung, Jonathan appreciated her honesty. "Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. Aguilar." Before Linda left, she reached out and squeezed Jonathan's hand. "Just don't let them break your spirit. This neighborhood is more than them. People like me, we appreciate your service, and we're here for you." With renewed hope, Jonathan thanked her. A small kindness can mean the world when darkness looms. Months went by, and though Jonathan and Alyssa did their best to ignore the Anders, the harassment continued. One evening, Jonathan returned from base to find Alyssa in tears. The windows of their SUV had been spray-painted with racial slurs. Alyssa had already taken photos for documentation, her hands shaking with rage and fear. The hatred now was more overt than ever. Jonathan filed a report with the local police station in Oceanside. Officers came by, took statements, and promised an investigation. But without direct evidence, their hands were tied. Meanwhile, Ned and Lisa Anders had become more brazen. Whenever Jonathan walked out to get the mail, he could hear them hurling insults under their breath. Sometimes they muttered vile remarks in loud enough whispers that it bordered on open harassment. For the most part, Jonathan kept his silence, but he feared for Alyssa's well-being. She had become jumpy, triple-checking locks and peering through blinds whenever she heard footsteps outside. And so, Jonathan took the only measures he could. He reinforced the locks, upgraded the home security system, and installed additional cameras to cover every angle of the property. If the Anders tried anything else, Jonathan vowed he would have them on tape. Alyssa had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. Jonathan was at home, content to spend a quiet Friday night reading. Exhausted from a rigorous week at Camp Pendleton, he dozed off on the couch. It was past midnight when a jarring crash jolted him awake. He bolted upright, heart pounding. From the living room window, he saw his front porch light swinging crazily as if someone had smashed into it. Another loud crash echoed, this time from the backyard. Instinct kicked in. Jonathan rushed to grab the small safe near his bedroom closet, where he kept a legally owned handgun for protection. He also grabbed his phone, heart hammering. As he inched down the hallway, he felt the back door had been forced open. A wave of anger and dread washed over him. The house smelled of spilled paint and something acrid. Flashes of light caught his eye, some sort of flickering. Someone was in his house. Crouching low, he peeked around the corner into the kitchen. His heart sank. Cabinets were ripped off their hinges. Broken glass from shattered plates was strewn across the floor. The stench of chemical fumes was overwhelming. And there, standing near the sink, with a can of paint thinner in one hand and a rag in the other, was Ned Anders. Lisa stood beside him, face twisted with hateful glee. They had come to trash the place, once and for all. Ned was muttering something vile when he spotted Jonathan. Their eyes locked. For a split second, the older man froze, perhaps realizing the gravity of what he was doing. But instead of fleeing, his expression twisted with hatred. "You think you can come here, boy, and live like one of us?" Ned seethed, voice quivering with rage. "Not on my street." Jonathan was angry, no, furious. But his training reminded him to keep control, to assess before acting. He held up his phone, the camera rolling. "You're on camera," he said through gritted teeth. "Put down the paint thinner and get out of my house." Lisa let out a cold laugh, stepping forward. "Or what? You gonna shoot us? Then we'll see how fast you end up behind bars." They had come prepared. Jonathan could see what they were banking on. If he harmed them, the story might be twisted. But there were security cameras. Jonathan had the sense to know he was being recorded from multiple angles too. With one hand, he discreetly pressed the phone's screen, alerting 911. "Police are on their way," he warned. "Stand down." Ned hurled the can of paint thinner across the room. It splashed onto the counters and the walls, leaving a pungent chemical smell. Jonathan's eyes stung. Lisa flung the rag in Jonathan's direction, and for a terrifying moment, he feared it was lit. But it wasn't, it was just a soiled rag. Still, the act reeked of intimidation. Suddenly, Ned charged, a metal pry bar in his hand, swinging it blindly. Jonathan, skilled in hand-to-hand combat, sidestepped the blow and tried to disarm Ned. The older man stumbled, lost his footing, and crashed onto the paint-slick floor, letting out a cry of pain. Lisa screeched and rushed at Jonathan, attempting to scratch at his face. He managed to restrain her, carefully holding her arm so she couldn't scratch him or break free. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights danced across the walls of the ruined kitchen. Jonathan exhaled with relief as he heard the authorities bursting through the front door. The police quickly took control of the situation. 2 officers handcuffed Ned and Lisa, who were both bruised and reeking of chemicals. Jonathan stepped back, hands trembling with adrenaline, heart pounding. He realized that in the chaos, he could have been seriously hurt or worse. The scene that greeted the police was unmistakable. Overturned furniture, fresh spray paint on the walls, reading vile epithets, and chemical-soaked rags scattered on the floor. The responding officers took in every detail. One of the officers, a stocky man with a calm voice, guided Jonathan away to ask questions. Another officer rummaged through the Anders' pockets, producing a ring of keys and a folded note with something scrawled on it. All the footage is on my home security cameras, Jonathan explained, voice steadier than his racing heart. I have them installed in multiple areas. They're motion activated and also store data in the cloud. This was exactly what the police needed. If the Anders were planning to claim self-defense or spin a false story, the video evidence would poke holes in their lies. The lead officer asked Jonathan for the video files, and Jonathan promised to share them as soon as possible. As Ned and Lisa were led away, they hurled curses at Jonathan, but for the first time, he felt the upper hand. Their hatred had crossed a line this time. It was them who would face the consequences. The next days blurred with statements, insurance claims, and repair estimates. Alyssa rushed back from her sister's place, horrified at the damage. Broken windows, wrecked furniture, and the deep stench of chemicals made the house barely livable. But as the news of the attack spread through the neighborhood, something remarkable happened. The community rallied around Jonathan and Alyssa. Linda Aguilar organized a small group of neighbors to help with the cleanup, refusing to accept payment. An off-duty local firefighter volunteered to power wash the spray-painted walls. Even local businesses pitched in. A nearby hardware store donated lumber to fix the broken door. A local paint shop provided free primer to cover the vile graffiti. What stood out most to Jonathan was how these kind acts seemed to overshadow the darkness the Anders had brought. Kindness, solidarity, and compassion lit a spark of hope inside him. The Anders might have tried to terrorize him out of the neighborhood, but they ended up galvanizing the community to support the Marine and his wife. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Ned and Lisa faced charges of breaking and entering, vandalism, and assault with a deadly weapon for the pry bar. The evidence was clear, and the judge set a preliminary hearing. The couple posted bail, but their reputations had already begun to crumble. A week before the preliminary hearing, Jonathan received a phone call from a local civil rights organization. Word of his ordeal had spread beyond just the neighborhood, and people across the region were outraged that a black Marine had been attacked so viciously, apparently for no reason other than hatred. The organization wanted to support Jonathan in taking legal action against the Anders, specifically for racially motivated crimes. Initially, Jonathan hesitated. His purpose in life was not to engage in civil lawsuits. He was a Marine, committed to defending freedom and justice, but he had never been a fan of public attention. Yet, after discussing with Alyssa, he realized how important it was to stand up, not just for himself, but for those who might not have the same platform or resources to fight back. They decided to meet with the organization's lawyer. That meeting proved eye-opening. The lawyer explained that this could be classified as a hate crime under state law, and additional charges could be tacked onto Ned and Lisa's case. Jonathan and Alyssa agreed to proceed in hopes of setting a precedent that might deter others from similar hateful acts. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Jonathan, wearing his formal Marine uniform for the first time in court, felt both anxious and determined. Alyssa held his hand as they walked into the courthouse. Their lawyer advised them it would be a short session to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to a full trial. Ned and Lisa Anders appeared equally tense. Gone were their smug expressions, replaced by worry lines. Their lawyer tried to downplay the incident, portraying the Anders as misguided individuals who had overreacted. But the prosecution had the security footage, which left no room for spin. It was all there. Ned and Lisa breaking the back door, rummaging through the house, spewing vile slurs, and attacking Jonathan. The judge reviewed the evidence and quickly concluded that there was sufficient cause to proceed with a criminal trial. Moreover, the prosecution informed the court that they intended to pursue hate crime enhancements. This would mean stiffer penalties if the Anders were found guilty. Ned and Lisa shot daggers at Jonathan, but he stood firm, feeling vindicated by the law's stance. Local media outlets picked up the story. Headlines broadcast, Black Marines home, trashed neighbors rally, racist attackers face hate crime charges. Comment sections erupted with a mix of support for Jonathan and condemnation of the Anders. Some trolls online tried to twist the narrative, but the overwhelming sentiment was on Jonathan's side. He had done everything by the book, installed security, called the police, and allowed the legal system to unfold. As the trial date loomed, the Anders found themselves pariahs in the community. Their friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with a hate crime. They began facing financial strain as legal bills piled up. Rumors spread that Ned's retirement pension was under scrutiny, and Lisa's modest job at a local florist had vanished once the owner learned about the incident. But the severest blow to their pride came from the public spotlight. Journalists uncovered that Ned had once served in a branch of the military decades ago, only to be dishonorably discharged for repeated misconduct. These revelations destroyed the Anders' attempts to garner sympathy by painting themselves as patriots. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Alyssa received an outpouring of support, from gift baskets left on their porch to letters of thanks from citizens across the country. Some were from fellow Marines who emphasized that an attack on one Marine was an attack on all. Others were from individuals who had experienced racial intimidation themselves. The story became a beacon of hope that standing up to hatred could bring about justice. The criminal trial commenced several months later. Jonathan and Alyssa gave their testimonies calmly, recounting the horror of that night. The security footage was shown in court, leaving the jury visibly shaken. The prosecution underscored the racial animus behind the Anders' actions, aligning it with the definitions of a hate crime. Ned and Lisa took the stand in their own defense, but their testimonies were riddled with inconsistencies. They claimed they only wanted to scare Jonathan into moving, but not to harm him. They insisted that the hateful slurs on the walls were the result of blind rage and not a manifestation of deep-seated racism. Their lawyer tried to paint them as remorseful, but the security footage told a different story, one of deliberate malice. It took the jury just a day to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts, including vandalism, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and hate crime enhancements. The judge sentenced Ned Anders to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. Lisa, deemed an accomplice with a lesser role, received 2 years, with a possibility of parole after 1. As the verdict was read, a hush fell over the courtroom. Ned glared at Jonathan with pure rage, while Lisa collapsed into tears. The bailiff moved to handcuff them, and in that moment, Jonathan felt a measure of justice. It was a hard-earned victory that would not erase the trauma, but at least it sent a clear message. Hatred had no place here. Life after the trial slowly returned to normal. The damage to Jonathan and Alyssa's home was repaired, with help from volunteers and professionals. The chemical stains and the graffiti had long been scrubbed away, replaced by fresh paint and a sense of renewed hope. The local news outlets covered the story's conclusion, celebrating the outcome as a victory against racism and for justice. Jonathan found himself bombarded with interview requests, many of which he declined. His primary wish was to go back to serving his country and enjoying a peaceful life with Alyssa. He did, however, agree to speak at a local town hall meeting where he expressed gratitude to the community that had rallied around them. Standing on a stage in front of a crowded room, he said, "I've always believed in the values we strive for in this country: equality, freedom, and justice. I'm proud to wear the uniform of the United States Marines, but this experience taught me that hate still lurks in corners of our society. We can't let it fester. By standing together, By supporting each other, we can shine a light into those dark corners and drive hatred away. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, and Jonathan felt a wave of emotion course through him. Moments later, he found Alyssa in the audience, wiping tears from her eyes. They held hands as they walked off stage, united not just as husband and wife, but as a testament to resilience. Over the next months, Jonathan continued his service at Camp Pendleton, while Alyssa resumed her work as a volunteer coordinator for a local charity. They received occasional updates about Ned and Lisa's legal appeals, all of which were denied. The community eventually moved on to other news, but the story remained a powerful reminder of the triumph of unity over hatred. Even Linda Aguilar would occasionally drop by with homemade tamales and share neighborhood gossip. She told Jonathan how a young interracial couple had moved in a few streets away, and they seemed so thrilled to have found a supportive community. Jonathan and Alyssa decided to pay them a friendly visit. As they greeted the newcomers, they saw the relief in the young couple's eyes, knowing that they had neighbors who would stand up for them no matter what. Sometimes, Jonathan would pause and reflect on how much had changed since he first moved in. The malicious stares, the half-muttered slurs, the jolt of fear at any loud noise, all were replaced by a sense of belonging. The Anders had tried to force him out of the neighborhood using fear. Instead, they only strengthened his resolve and the neighborhood's sense of solidarity. In time, Jonathan and Alyssa's home felt like the sanctuary they had always hoped it would be. Nightmares of that fateful night gradually faded, replaced by new memories, barbecues with friends, the playful squeals of neighborhood kids, and laughter shared under the California sun. They never forgot the trauma, but they refused to let it define them. And so the story of the racist couple who trashed a Black Marine's home became a beacon of karma fulfilled and a testament to the power of standing up for what is right. If there's one message this story leaves us with, it's that darkness cannot snuff out light when a community comes together. Sergeant Jonathan King faced hatred on his own doorstep, yet emerged stronger and more united with the neighbors who rallied behind him. The racist couple, Ned and Lisa Anders, learned the hard way that you can't run from the consequences of hate. Eventually, it catches up with you. Thank you for joining us on this deeply emotional, twist-filled journey. If this story resonated with you, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends to spread awareness, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that shine a spotlight on resilience and justice. Together, let's keep standing up against prejudice and inspiring one another to be the light our world so desperately needs.